Hey, Dr. Robertson.
Hey, Dr. Mosley, how are you?
Doing pretty good. What are we talking about today?
Today we're going to talk about beer. As you can
Mm.
see, I went to a trouble to come up with some really fancy slides to do this.
Well,
Um,
this class isn't marketing, so it's okay.
yeah. And I'm going to pull back the curtain a little bit for the students just to give you a little insight. We're having to re-record this because we went off on a tangent earlier into some pretty
Well, I mean,
inappropriate material, so we're starting over.
when you talk about beer, there's such a varied history that there's things that you can find it yourself,
Yeah,
but
it just went in the wrong direction real
yeah,
fast.
we skewed the wrong way.
So we're going to try, we're starting over to give you a better lecture.
Yes, but what you should do is check out your D2L. Dr. Robertson has posted a video there.
Yes, I've got a video. It's called Beer Wars, and it's a documentary, but it's very funny, and it's about the three-tiered distribution system for beer in America. So definitely worth working out. There will definitely be questions on an exam from it, so you should check that out.
Yeah.
Okay, so beer. What is beer? Beer is liquid bread. You know, that's basically the same things that show up in bread. Grains, water, yeast show up in beer. We also add hops to beer, which is a preservative agent, a flavoring agent. Interestingly enough, hops is the only edible part of any cannabinoid plant, so it's in the cannabis family. It's the only one that's eaten or consumed.
It's not what they tell us in Denver, but all right.
Yeah. So when you make beer, the main flavor of beer is barley and hops. Now the yeast can give it some flavor profile also, but the two main components are barley and hops.
Yeah.
That's the bready flavor of it, and then the kind of piney scent that comes with beer.
Yeah.
You can add other things to it to stretch it out because barley's expensive. So if you have a cheaper grain like corn or rice, you can use those to make it. It's considered to generally be lower quality, and those are called adjuncts. So like if you get a wheat beer or a wheat beer, like say a Blue Moon or a Bell's Oberon, those are wheat beers. The adjunct that's been added to them is wheat.
Oh.
And curiously enough, when you make a wheat beer, one of the characteristics of a wheat beer is adding wheat to the beer makes it cloudy. So you won't have a nice clear beer. You'll have a cloudy beer.
Might be symbolic of your judgment later if you have too many.
It might be. So today, it's just kind of general knowledge, general talk about beer, and then I'll get more detailed stuff later. So this is just kind of general knowledge about beer. So there is an argument to be made that beer has existed as long as human society.
Huh. I mean, why drink water when you can drink beer?
Yeah, really. Well, and that's the thing. Historically, people didn't drink water because water could be polluted. And so people would drink beer or spirits or wine or something else.
It's a little bit more purified, so it's safer to drink and you don't die.
So if you guys want something interesting to do, go on YouTube and search for a video called How Beer Saved the World and watch it. It's the history of beer. And they make a pretty good argument that the history of humankind is the history of beer and that basically agriculture happened so people could grow barley to grow beer.
Yeah. I mean, if you're going to have to grow something, why grow food?
Right.
When you can grow something that you can drink, huh?
Yeah, well, that was kind of the thing, that this was, they had kind of accidentally discovered alcohol, and that wasn't something that just occurred in nature that they could hunt and gather for. So there's an argument to be made that agriculture, the development of civilization, was a result of human beings coming together to grow barley to make beer. So that human civilization is actually a result of beer. It's a good documentary. It's worth checking out. It's called How Beer Saved the World. Again, so we know, beer, we have history of it going back past 4,200 BC. So this is over 6,000 year history of beer, of how long it's been around.
Yeah.
In the pyramids, there are recipes in the hieroglyphics for how to make beer.
Ah, that's awesome.
Yeah. The workers on the pyramids were paid in beer.
I mean, what else do you need?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, the Egyptians, the Romans, pretty much every culture drank beer in some form. Um, the first large brewery in America was by William Penn, the guy that Pennsylvania is named after. Sam Adams, John Adams, pretty much all of the founding fathers were beer makers.
I mean, if you're going to name a state after somebody, make it after the guy who gave you the courage to start the Marine Corps.
Yeah. So, I said almost all the founding fathers were beer makers. It has to go with water supplies were polluted. If you drink water, you're going to get a disease because there was no water treatment. There was no fluoridation. There was no chlorination. There's nothing to make the water safe to drink.
So they didn't put 2 and 2 together that they could also boil the water to make it safe to drink instead of just making beer?
Well, they did, but you boil the water to make the beer, but also that's why tea and coffee became popular, or that those were alternatives for not having alcohol. But pretty much you had to drink something that was fermented because the alcohol and the hops would kill any microbes in it, or you had to boil it. So like tea and coffee.
Yeah.
So, humans, they didn't drink water as, like especially in America, the history of America is the history of alcohol consumption. If you read historical accounts of how much alcohol, like the founding fathers consumed and purchased, the amount is staggering.
Wow. Yeah, I believe it.
So, a little bit about alcohol laws. Alcohol laws are strange, and that's why I had you guys go in and find some weird alcohol laws, and I'm gonna, I haven't read through them yet, but I'm going to. But one big one in 1935, it was this was after Prohibition. So Prohibition, alcohol is outlawed, then it comes back, but you couldn't use words on the label to tell how strong it was.
I mean, I'm just saying, this has got to be one of the worst ideas you can possibly have. Because if somebody just wants to have a light beverage and, they go and grab something that's 100 proof instead.
Well, with beer, you were not allowed to put anything that denoted strength on it. So like this is a can that came after 1993, this Colt 45 Power Master, like it indicates higher strength. And then what's kind of funny is the law used to say you can't put anything that denotes strength on it because then people will drink high alcohol stuff and get obliterated. But in 2007, the U.S. Treasury Department, Alcohol and the Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau actually required that alcohol now has to have the ABV, the alcohol by volume, printed on the bottle. So we've gone from a situation where you were forbidden from showing the strength or indicating strength to required for the same thing. Well, we don't want people to, we want people to make an informed choice. Yeah. Okay, so back to the ingredients. The things that make beer. Water. Water is important, and this is what water is why Anheuser-Busch, why they get mad respect from me, why Budweiser and Busch beer and those things get mad respect from me. Because, okay, people who live in Glenn County, what does the water here taste like?
Well, my wife always claims that there's a specific taste, so yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So the amazing thing about Anheuser-Busch, Budweiser, is they have a brewery in St. Louis. They have a brewery in Atlanta. They have a brewery in Salt Lake City. And they make Budweiser, and it tastes the same everywhere.
Like nothing. Oh, yeah, I mean.
But that is an amazing quality control thing, that they were able to create a beer, like using local water sources, create beer that tastes the same everywhere.
Well, yeah, they must have some kind of specialized filtration system to get it the way they want it. Because Guinness is like notorious for, the only real Guinness is the stuff that you get that was made in Dublin.
Yeah.
By Dublin water.
Well, but the reason they have all the what bottling plants everywhere, like why Anheuser-Busch has so many bottling plants, why every company like Coca-Cola, is that water is heavy and it's expensive. So rather than making beer in one factory and shipping it all over the country and paying to ship mostly water, which is heavy, well, we'll ship the grain to different locations and make the beer locally, and that way shipping will be less. We'll make it with local water.
Makes sense.
Malt is the barley, corn, and rice can be the adjuncts to stretch it out to get more alcohol content. Because what happens is fermentation. Fermentation is the yeast. Here it says the brewer's yeast. The yeast eats the sugars in the grains, so like the barley, and then essentially it poops out carbon dioxide and alcohol. So that's what's happening. So anything that provides sugar, the corn, the rice, the malt, those things are going to get converted into alcohol and carbon dioxide up to a point. We'll talk about hops. We'll talk about all these a little bit with more on each slide. So like I said, the very fact that you can create beer that tastes the same for many different locations, that's a real testament to what the big brewers do well. That sort of ability to be consistent is an amazing, just as someone who's a cook or who has worked with people who make beer at home, every batch is different. Every time I work with a friend who's a brewer and we make beer at home, it's a little bit different. We're doing our very best to control it. And we're using the same beer or the same ingredients, the same location over and over and over, and we still have variation. But water is one of those things like Coors beer in the Rocky Mountains. One of the things they're famous for is they're using mountain water to make their beer, and they say that gives it its distinctive flavor or part of it. Malt is barley. So you take the barley and you soak it in water and you allow it to sprout. So it starts to turn. It starts to green. It goes from a grain to starting to be a plant. But what's happening here is that when it malts, is that the starch that's present in the barley is being converted to sugar. So that the yeast can't eat starch, but they can eat sugar. So we malt the barley, we start converting the starch into sugar, and then we use that to make the beer.
Makes sense.
Go ahead.
I said that makes sense. If you've never been to a brewery, I really implore everybody to go check one out at least once.
Yeah.
They're very fascinating.
Yeah. Go to Hop Soul. They're super friendly. They got good pizza. Highly recommended. And that's local. They also have good wings.
And why have I not tried their wings? I don't know.
Let's see. So barley gives beer its flavor and kind of its distinctiveness. It's the thing that makes beer beer. And is the primary body and weight of beer. With quality beer, it's often the only grain that's allowed. So I said, you can sometimes use adjuncts to stretch it out. With a lot of beer recipes, especially if they're going for something of higher quality, it'll be the only thing that's allowed in there. And it actually is the subject of the oldest food purity law in the world, which is a Bavarian law called the Reinheitsgebot, which was written in the 1400s and says that by law, beer can only be made from malt, hops, and water. You can't have anything else in it. These are the only ingredients that are acceptable. It's kind of interesting that they say malt, hops, and water, don't mention yeast, but it makes sense if you think about the fact that this was in the 1400s and they didn't know that microorganisms exist. Okay, so with a lot of beer, especially things like products from Anheuser-Busch, they will have adjuncts because we need more starch or sugar in it. Typically, these things don't have a lot of flavor, so you get lighter, milder brews, which is the beer that most Americans drink. We drink pale lagers for the most part. That's Busch Light, Coors, Miller, Budweiser. All of those beers are American pale lagers. they're very, very, very light beers. A lot of American beer uses rice. Anheuser-Busch is actually the largest rice purchaser in the world. They purchase 20% of all American rice production goes into beer.
Wow.
Yeah. And with even less expensive beers like malt liquor, where the idea is to get as high a
ABV.
ABV, and as high alcohol content as possible, as cheaply as possible, they will actually use corn or corn syrup as an adjunct.
I mean, why not? I mean,
yeah, the yeast eat it and convert it into carbon dioxide and
Yeah.
alcohol, so it works.
well, yeah. I mean, all of a sudden you got your sugars already feeding it. It's good. It's good.
Yeah. Now, there are other adjuncts that can be added. Like often there are things like oatmeal stout. You can add oatmeal. It makes it smooth or silky in the mouth. You can add rye, which adds that sort of anise flavor of spiciness.
Yeah,
to it.
not a huge fan. I'm not going to lie.
You can add wheat to it, which tends to make it a lighter beer that's slightly tart. They tend to be cloudy. They tend to keep their head well. Personally, I love wheat beers. I think it is the perfect beer to go with a hamburger because you get a good quality hamburger with a good bun, like a freshly baked bun, and the beer has hints of breadiness to it because it's made with barley, it's made with wheat, it's made with yeast, and the two flavors just work very well together. So wheat beers and hamburgers. Personal preference. Hops. Hops, like I said, is a cannabinoid. It's a vine. It's a climbing vine. It looks kind of like a little green pine cone.
Yeah, I mean, let's be honest. The first introduction most people had to hops is a Sam's Adam commercial.
Probably. Some of the neat things about hops is it's naturally antiseptic. So if you're making something for humans to consume prior to a time when you understood food safety, you add hops to this thing, all you know is, wow, it stays good for a long time. It doesn't go bad. It doesn't make anyone sick. So hops has a natural antiseptic flavor. It keeps the beer fresher longer. So this is actually the beer that's very popular now, and it's a fad. It's gone on too long, and it's too much. Are the IPAs?
I mean, really, can we just let those things go away?
I like an IPA occasionally, but it's too much. It's gone too far. It's
too far, man. Yeah. I don't know. I just never gotten into them.
The way that IPAs came about, the India Pale Ale, is that India was a colony of Great Britain. The beer was made in Britain and shipped to soldiers in India. It had to travel around the tip of South America on a very long boat ride, which was warm and unsteady. And this was an environment where the beer would go bad. So they added double or triple the amount of hops to it so that the beer wouldn't go bad. And that was the beer that showed up in India, was this long fermented, aged, heavily hopped beer. And so the soldiers developed a taste for it. And that's where the IPA came from.
I mean, when we would get deployed to like middle of nowhere, we would be drinking Natty Light. Doesn't mean that when I went home, I still drank Natty Light.
Yeah. So other things hops do, it provides the bitter flavor of beer, the bitterness. It provides the distinctive beer flavor and the smell of beer.
Yeah, some people really love it, and bless them. And if
it's necessary. I just feel that most modern IPAs have too much.
Yeah.
So yeast. Yeast is a microorganism, and what it does is it converts sugar into alcohol and carbon dioxide. The different yeasts have slightly different flavor profiles to them, from different parts of the world. And then, like if you have a lager or if you have an ale, there's some different types of yeast that produce different types of beers. But basically, it's just eating sugar and making alcohol. Okay, so how do we make beer?
One step at a time.
Yeah, one step at a time. So we grind the grain. So you grind up the barley, you add some hot water to it, and so it'll start to convert to wort. So it'll start to convert the starches to sugar. Then you let it. You add the hops to give it flavor. Then you add yeast, and the yeast starts eating the sugar. And then you let that sit for a while. Then you drain the liquid off of the grain. So it's pulled the sugars out of the grain into the liquid, and you keep that liquid, and then that becomes your beer.
Yeah, it's really, I can't stress this enough, how amazing it is to watch beer get made. It's just mesmerizing watching them. Like, it's just a craft.
Yeah.
Anyways.
What's this nasty foamy stuff? And then at the end, you get this delicious, clear beer. It's amazing. So three steps to making beer. There's a brew house, there's fermentation and aging. In the brew house are kind of all the things that we do to prepare the grain. So the grain is, like I said, it's ground up, it's mixed with water, this turns the starches into sugar. It's put into what's called a tun, T-U-N, where it sits and the starch and sugars change. Then it is taken out and the grains are siphoned off or strained off.
Yeah.
It is put into a kettle and boiled. Then that has hops added to it. And then it sits and it says allow the protein to sit out. This is the clarification stage where you've got a lot of cloudy stuff in there. If you let it sit a little while, that stuff settles to the bottom and you get a nice clear beer.
You know, some beers I always enjoyed to be a little bit less clear. You remember Bell's?
Yeah, that's a wheat beer. That's a wheat beer. The Oberon.
Yeah. If you got the real one, it was fantastic. Yeah.
So the liquid that comes out at this point that has the starch and has the sugar, has the flavoring off, this is called wort. And the wort is what becomes the beer. So we add some yeast to it. We may add, sometimes you add a little bit of sugar to it, and it's going to give off CO2. So it's going to eat sugar, it's going to give off alcohol, it's going to give off CO2. Sometimes we collect the CO2 because the yeast they respire and they give off CO2. So we can collect this because, sometimes it's useful to have CO2 for later in the process, either to add back to the beer to carbonate it or to work when you have the draft system. So sometimes the CO2 is collected. It ferments for about a week. So for about a week, we let the yeast eat the sugar.
That's really dependent on the type of beer, right?
Yeah, the type of beer, the temperature. There are a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah.
But I'm being very generic here. About a week. Then it's filtered and sent off for aging. If you don't age it, you have what's called green beer. You can drink it. It just really hasn't developed the flavor yet. It's kind of unpleasant. Yeah. It's filtered. If there's not enough CO2 in the beer, you can now inject CO2 into it. Or there's a German process. You'll see a lot of these terms are German. Krausening, which is where we add a fermenting beer back to this low CO2 beer to increase the amount of carbonation naturally. And then it goes into a tank and where it's held for either bottling or canning or putting in kegs. So bottles, cans, and kegs. Bottles are pasteurized.
Makes sense.
So bottled beer tastes slightly different than can and keg beer. And this is a very, very slight, you're getting into one of those kind of esoterica things where people, I only drink this.
I'm guessing that there's only like a few people in the world that could actually tell the difference.
But it's been heated up to 140 degrees for about 30 minutes. And this makes bottled beer last longer than can or draft beer because it's been pasteurized.
Is there a reason that they only pasteurize bottles and not cans?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I am sure there is. And if somebody wants to go out there and look and let me know, I will include it in a future lecture.
Yeah. I'm wondering if it's because cans, like, it might expand a little. I don't know.
I don't know.
It's weird.
And then we also have kegs,
Yeah.
and beer, especially in kegs, is alive. It still has some living yeast still present in it. And so it's important to keep it cold, because if not, it will continue to have biological processes in it and can develop some off flavors.
Yeah.
So, thing of service right here, service question or a service issue. How do you know when a glass is clean enough?
Well, water will shed in even sheets.
Well, why is it important that our glass is clean?
Well, so there's no outside contaminants that will alter the flavor of the beverage being served.
Yeah, we don't want any oils or salt or anything like that present. Also, those contaminants prevent head development. So your beer will go flat faster and it won't develop a head when you pour it. And you want a little bit of a head because the head gives off the aroma, and that's part of the enjoyment of beer. And so you need some head present on the top of it when you serve it, ideally for people who are beer connoisseurs. Ways that we tell their glasses are clean: you can dip them in water, and if the water sheets off of them easily when the water's running, rather than sticking in parts and forming bubbles or droplets.
Yeah. You can sprinkle salt on it, huh?
Yeah.
So why does this why is this a thing?
Because on a clean glass, the salt won't clump. So if you have a clean glass, it'll be an even coating of salt. So this is a way to see if your glasses are clean enough. If it's not, the salt will actually clump to the contaminants. So you'll end up with
but once you sprinkle salt on it, it's no longer a clean glass.
Well,
right?
this is a way to see if your glasses in general are clean.
Okay.
You pull one out and you sacrifice.
Sacrifice one for the greater good. Okay. Okay.
The head retention test doesn't keep a head on it long enough after you pour it. And the lacing test is, you've probably noticed this if you drink a beer, and it'll leave a ring of foam in the beer.
So if it's a perfect ring, it's clean. If it's kind of random on where it's at, it's not.
If it does, if it leaves a clean ring, then the glass is clean. So if it leaves a perfect ring, if it becomes if it runs down and is random, then it's not.
This is usually only important on the first beer.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So some rules about basic techniques on glass washing. It's basically like in a restaurant we use a 3-compartment sink. We want to use a fat-free detergent. Detergents are often made with fat. That's just the way soap is made. But that's not what we want on our beer glasses. So you want to scrub them with a fat-free detergent. You want to rinse them with a cool sink. You want to sanitize them and then let them air dry. You don't wipe them with a cloth. If you wipe them with a cloth to dry them, they are no longer sanitary.
Makes sense. I mean, because the cloth is going to have those little microfibers and everything else. And
okay, well, let's stop there for now, Matt. I'm going to put up another lecture where you and I talk about beer with Susan Gregory.
Oh, that'll be excellent. Now, Dr. Susan Gregory, Robbie and I both worked with her at Eastern Michigan University, and she was my master's chair. So that'll be exciting. I can't believe you got her to join us.
Yeah. So
Excellent.
She's going to, for the next lecture where we talk about beer, she's going to join us.
Oh, can't wait. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.